Imagine needing one camera, just one, to shoot amazing landscapes, fast action sports, and like professional quality video. That's what a lot of photographers want, right? Like the holy grail.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to deep dive into the rumors about this Panasonic S1R2, and we'll talk about if it could be that camera or if Panasonic is, focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for cameras, that's for sure.
It is.
So this deep dive is based on an article by Leo Liang over at lensclear.net.
Okay.
He's a photography enthusiast, and he's got some really good thoughts about what Panasonic might be thinking with this new camera.
I like it. All right, so before we, really get into all the S1R2 speculation, can we kind of set the stage first? Panasonic already has a bunch of cameras in their S-series lineup, right? So where do those fit in now?
Yeah, so you've got the S5 series.
Right.
Those have become pretty popular, especially with the S5i, with that upgraded autofocus.
Yeah.
They're seen as good all-rounders, good for stills, good for video, and that's why a lot of content creators are gravitating towards them.
Yeah, they're popular. And then you've also got the S9, right? Which is still, like, rumored, but that seems like it's going to be a smaller, lighter build, maybe aimed at people who want full-frame quality but aren't, like, full-on pros.
Yeah, that's the thought. A little more casual,
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the S1 series, which is kind of Panasonic's Pro line. So the S1R, that's the high-resolution one.
Yeah.
The S1H is that beastly video-centric camera. And then the S1 kind of sits in the middle. It's a solid all-around option.
Okay, so they've kind of got all those bases covered, right? But that's where this S1R2, it's like, where does it even fit in?
Right.
Leo makes this argument that going straight up against the Sony A7RV might be a mistake.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's interesting because he recognizes the A7RV is a really good camera. It's got that crazy, like, 61 megapixel sensor,
Yeah.
AI-powered autofocus. I mean, really impressive stuff.
Yeah.
But he calls it a specialist camera. What do you think he means by that?
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, it's great for landscapes, Anything where you need that insane resolution, but maybe not the best for, like, everything.
You got it. And he brings up this review by Gordon Lang over at Camera Labs. And Gordon says, yeah, the A7RV, fantastic high-res camera, but some other cameras are better for other kinds of photography, like more versatile.
Yeah, right. Okay, so if going after the A7RV is not the right play, then what should Panasonic be focusing on with the S1R2? Leo has some ideas, right?
He does. He does. It gets pretty interesting. He thinks Panasonic should set their sights on cameras like the Nikon Z8 and the Canon EOS R5 Mark II.
Okay.
Those are known for being, super versatile, good at high-speed action, high-resolution stuff, AND Pro video.
Wow. So those are some tough cameras to beat. So, like, what would this S1R2 need to be able to compete with those?
Well, he says first, blazing fast burst shooting. Like,
Yeah.
it has to be at least 20 frames per second to match that Z8. Ideally, even faster.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially for wildlife photography, you got to capture those split-second moments.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You can't miss a bird taking off or a cheetah running.
Right. You miss that shot, it's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the sensor, he thinks 45 to 50 megapixels, somewhere in there, would be that sweet spot. High res, but the files aren't going to be crazy big.
That makes sense. So we've got the speed, we've got the resolution, but can't forget about video, right?
Right.
Especially for Panasonic, that's kind of their, their thing.
Yeah, that's where they really shine.
What does Leo say about that?
Well, he says internal 6K or 8K recording is absolutely essential, along with, those professional codecs, like ProRes RAW.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that might not mean a lot to some people listening, but ProRes RAW, it's that format video editors love.
Yeah.
Because it gives them so much more control when they're, color grading and finishing projects.
Yeah, it's like having a digital negative that you can really tweak in post-production to get exactly the look you want.
Perfect analogy.
Okay.
And it ties into what we talked about, like Panasonic's history with video. Decades they've been doing this. Going back to pro camcorders, broadcast equipment.
They really know their stuff.
They do.
Okay, but what about autofocus?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's one area where Panasonic, maybe hasn't always been the best, especially compared to some of their competitors.
You're not wrong, and Leo doesn't shy away from that. He says S1R2 needs top-notch autofocus.
Yeah.
Got to build on the improvements they made with the S5 SU.
Right.
And he's not just talking about AI and subject recognition. Like, the whole system has to be fast and reliable in every situation.
Right, not just ideal conditions.
Exactly. Exactly. He also mentions, the build has to be really tough. Weather sealing. Intuitive controls. the things working pros need. And of course, a high-resolution EVF.
Right, that electronic viewfinder so you can really see what you're shooting.
Yep.
That's going to be good.
And we can't forget things like fast Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, maybe even an Ethernet port for pros who need to transfer stuff quickly.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So Leo's laid out what he thinks the S1R2 needs to be, but can Panasonic really pull this off? Like, what are their chances?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Leo points to a few things that give Panasonic a real edge. And first, let's talk about that video heritage, right?
Right, yeah.
They've been pushing the limits in video tech for, like, forever.
They have.
Gives them a solid foundation.
They've proven they can do it. What else is there?
The L-mount alliance. You've heard of megapixels, right?
Of course.
Well, lenses are just as important. L-mount alliance means Panasonic users can use lenses from not just Panasonic, but Leica and Sigma too.
So it's not just about the camera body itself. It's
Yeah.
that whole ecosystem of lenses to choose from.
Exactly.
That's going to be huge for pro photographers who have already, invested in those lenses.
Huge, yeah. Tons of flexibility. And on top of that, Panasonic has a history of, like, real innovation. Think back to the dual image stabilization on the GH5. That was revolutionary.
Yeah, change the game for handheld shooting.
Completely. So they've shown they're willing to try new things, take risks.
That's a good sign.
It is. It is. But let's not get too excited. The camera market's really tough.
It is.
There's some amazing cameras out there. So Panasonic really needs to be smart and execute well if they want this S1R2 to be a hit.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot. We've talked about their current S-series lineup. Maybe going after the Sony A7RV might not be the best move. And what features Leo thinks the S1R2 needs to compete with, the Nikon Z8, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. What are your big takeaways from all of this?
Well, for me, the bottom line is Panasonic has a chance to really shake things up at the high end of the market.
Okay.
They've got strengths in video, the lens ecosystem is fantastic, and they've got a track record of innovating.
Right.
But they have to use all of that wisely.
They can't just rely on what they've done before.
Right, they got to bring their A game for this new camera. And if they can nail those features Leo talked about, that speed, the balanced resolution, top-tier video, and an autofocus system that's truly reliable, this S1R2 could be a real force to be reckoned with.
It could redefine what a pro hybrid camera can actually do.
It could.
But it's not just about the specs and the features, is it?
You're right. It's about how all that translates into real-world performance.
Yeah.
How the camera feels in your hands, how it helps you capture your vision.
Right, right.
And that's something we'll have to see when it's actually released.
Well, until then, we'll just have to wait and see. But before we get carried away with all the what-ifs, let's dig into some more of those specifics that Leo highlighted. Like, really understand those details so we can appreciate what this S1R2 could potentially be.
Absolutely. And one of the areas where Panasonic really has a chance to stand out is video. They've been, pushing boundaries for years, and the S1R2 could be a chance to showcase all that expertise.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What makes Panasonic like the company when it comes to video?
Well, they've been making professional-grade video equipment for, like, decades. I mean, think about their pro camcorders, broadcast equipment.
Right.
All that experience goes into their mirrorless cameras, too.
So they're not just like, oh yeah, let's throw a video mode on this stills camera. They know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing. They know what filmmakers need in terms of image quality and the features. Think about cameras like the GH5 and the S1H. They've become industry standards because they offer great image quality, recording formats, codecs, you name it.
Right. They cater to those professional needs.
Exactly.
And that reputation, it gives them a big advantage when they're developing a camera like the S1R2.
Absolutely.
They're not starting from scratch.
Not at all. They're building on a really solid foundation.
Okay, so they've got the video chops.
Yep.
But they're not the only company with video expertise. Like, what makes you think they can actually pull this off, with all the competition out there?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it leads perfectly into another important piece.
Yeah.
The L-mount alliance.
Okay, so remind us, what's the L-mount alliance all about? And why is it important for a camera like the S1R2?
So, we talk about megapixels with cameras.
Yeah, of course.
Lenses matter just as much.
Okay.
The All-Mount Alliance is like a partnership between Panasonic, Leica, and Sigma.
Okay.
They share this lens mount system, so you can use lenses from any of those brands on any L-mount camera.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just about what lenses Panasonic makes.
Right. It's like this huge library of lenses, all top-notch quality.
That's incredible, especially for a pro photographer who's building a system,
Yeah.
not just buying one camera body.
Huge flexibility.
And it's not just about the number of lenses, it's about the quality, right?
Yeah. Top-tier manufacturers all working together.
That's a really strong point for Panasonic.
It is. And then on top of that, they've got that history of innovation.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, remember that dual image stabilization
Yep.
in the GH5? That was game-changing.
It was. They're willing to try new things.
They are.
It's a good sign.
It is a good sign. But, the camera market is tough.
Yeah,
And Panasonic needs to be smart about how they approach this,
right.
especially if they want the S1R2 to be a success.
Okay, so we've got the video heritage, we've got the lenses, but one more advantage that Leo mentioned, which was their, history of innovation. They're not afraid to kind of push the boundaries of what a camera can do.
Right. And that's key in such a competitive market. Remember the dual image stabilization system I was talking about
Yeah.
in the GH5?
Yeah.
That was a game changer. It really set Panasonic apart. Or the 6K internal recording in the S1H. A huge step forward for filmmakers.
So it's not just about keeping up, it's about doing something different, right? Like finding those new solutions and helping people be more creative.
You got it. And that's where I think Panasonic has the potential to really shine with the S1R2. Bring that same spirit of innovation, create a camera that's more than just a list of specs.
Right.
It's a tool that inspires photographers and filmmakers to be more creative.
So it's that combination of heritage, resources, and the willingness to experiment. That's a good mix. But can they actually deliver with the S1R2? That's the big question.
That is the big question. And, one of the big factors is going to be autofocus performance.
Yeah.
Panasonic's had its ups and downs, but they've also shown they can make some serious improvements.
Right, because for a long time, autofocus was seen as, one of their weak points, especially compared to Sony and Canon.
You're right.
But we've seen progress, right? What makes you think they can build on that momentum with this new camera?
Well, S5's. That autofocus system was a huge leap forward. It was clear they were serious about fixing that problem.
Yeah.
And, it can compete with the best out there now.
Right, so if they can take those improvements from the S5 time and make them even better for the S1R2, it's going to be a really impressive autofocus system.
It could be. It really could be. And that would be a huge selling point, especially for pro photographers who need it to be fast, accurate, and reliable in all kinds of shooting conditions. Think about sports photography, wildlife photography.
Right. You can't miss those shots because your autofocus is struggling.
Exactly. You need something fast, responsive, smart enough to track those moving subjects and keep them in focus.
Yeah.
And the S1R2 needs to deliver on that. Leo actually argues that relying only on AI-powered autofocus, it's not enough.
Okay.
He thinks it needs to be a mix of AI and those more, traditional phase detection autofocus systems.
So like a hybrid approach, the best of both worlds.
You got it. And that's something that Nikon and Canon, they've done really well with their latest cameras.
Okay.
The Z8, ESR5 Mark II, they've got amazing autofocus systems. If Panasonic wants to compete, they've got to bring their A game.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle, for sure. But it's just one piece, right? There's more to a camera than just that.
Oh, absolutely. It's how all those elements work together.
Yeah.
The video, the lenses, the autofocus, how well it's built, how it feels in your hand.
Right.
It's all connected.
It's all going to work together.
It does. Can make a camera that feels intuitive, responsive, and helps you get your vision out there.
Right.
And that's what makes this S1R2 so exciting. It has the potential to not only meet the needs of professionals, but to push the boundaries of what a hybrid camera can do.
Like change expectations entirely.
Yeah.
And that's what we're hoping for, right? A camera that inspires you to create, to go out and explore and, push your own boundaries.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have a tool that lets you tell your stories in these new, exciting ways.
Okay, so we've talked about what Panasonic needs to do to make the S1R2 successful. But what about the competition? Specifically, why is Leo so convinced that trying to beat the Sony A7RV on specs, why is that the wrong move for Panasonic?
Well, he makes a great point, and it goes back to that idea of, playing to your strengths. He's not saying the A7RV is a bad camera.
Right.
In fact, he mentions a bunch of reviews that praise it, for the resolution and the AI autofocus.
Yeah, so he's saying Sony's done a great job on certain things.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for photographers who need that, like, super high resolution.
Right. But his point is, if Panasonic tries to compete just on those terms, they're basically playing Sony's game.
Right.
And they might lose.
It's like trying to beat Michael Jordan at basketball.
Exactly. You're not going to win.
Yeah, no.
So Leo thinks Panasonic needs to do something different, focus on what they're good at. And that's video, the lenses they've got with the L-mount Alliance, and their history of innovation.
So it's about offering something that truly sets them apart, not just being a Me Too camera.
Exactly. And he thinks by doing that, they can create a camera that appeals to a different kind of photographer.
Okay.
Maybe someone who's not so focused on, just megapixels, but someone who wants a camera that's versatile, performs well, and takes a more, holistic approach to photography.
It's about the whole experience.
It is.
It's not just about one spec or feature.
It's about creating a camera that's more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, a camera that empowers you to tell your story in a new way.
That's it. And that's what makes this S1R2 so exciting. It's not just about specs and features. It's about the potential for Panasonic to create something truly unique and special, a camera that inspires a new generation of storytellers.
I like it. Okay, so we've talked about why going after the Sony A7RV might not be the best strategy, but let's go back to those specific features that Leo thinks would make this S1R2 a competitor, against cameras like the Nikon Z8 and the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. He's pretty specific about what Panasonic needs to do, right?
He is. It starts with speed. He says the S1R2 has to have this crazy fast burst shooting rate, at least 20 frames per second, to keep up with the Nikon Z8 and the Canon.
Right.
He even says Panasonic should try to go even faster than that, like push the limits.
Wow. So not just match the competition, set a new standard.
Exactly. And I think that ambition is refreshing,
Yeah.
It's not about settling. It's about pushing the envelope. And honestly, it's something Panasonic has done before.
They have. But speed isn't everything, right?
Of course not.
Resolution is still important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially for pro photographers who need those detailed high-res images.
Right. Leo acknowledges that megapixels matter, but he says there's a point where more isn't always better.
Okay.
He thinks that sweet spot for the S1R2 might be somewhere between 45 and 50 megapixels.
So it's that balance of detail, but keeping the files manageable.
That's it. You want those sharp pictures, but you don't want huge files slowing down your workflow. And a lot of photographers, especially those shooting tons of images, that's a big deal.
Makes sense. You need a camera that delivers the goods without giving you a headache later on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where, that 45 to 50 megapixel range, it seems like a good balance. Enough detail for most pros, but without those crazy file sizes.
Right. Okay, so we've got speed. We've got resolution. What about video?
Yes.
We talked about Panasonic's legacy in video.
Yes.
But what does Leo say this S1R2 needs to actually deliver?
He doesn't hold back.
Okay.
He says internal 6K, maybe even 8K recording is essential.
Wow.
Along with the pro-level codecs like ProRes RAW.
So he's saying basically it needs to be as good, maybe even better, than those dedicated cinema cameras.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And he thinks Panasonic can do it.
Okay.
They've shown they can push the limits when it comes to video. And the S1R2 could be the camera that really solidifies them as the leader in hybrid camera technology.
So it's not just about being good at both stills and video. It's about excelling at both. Being able to switch between them seamlessly, no compromises.
Exactly. It's a tall order.
Yeah.
But, Panasonic seems like they can handle it. They've got the experience, the technology, those partnerships.
Right.
And if they can do it, they'll have a truly special camera.
A game changer.
It would be.
Okay, so speed, resolution, video, those are all huge. But there's one more thing we haven't really talked about. Autofocus. Yeah. What's Leo saying about the autofocus for the S1R2?
He really stresses that Panasonic has to get this right.
Yeah.
He says they made good progress with the S5i, but there's still room to improve. And it's not just subject recognition tracking. It's the overall speed, accuracy, and how reliable it is.
So it can't just, see a subject, it's got to lock onto it fast, keep it in focus, even when things are moving, lighting's changing.
You got it. And Nikon and Canon, they've done this really well with their newest cameras.
Right.
Like I said, Z8, EOS R5 Mark II, incredible autofocus. Panasonic's got a high bar to clear.
It's a challenge, yeah, but it's also a chance to show everyone that they're serious about competing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if they can deliver an autofocus system that's truly top of the line, it could be a big reason for photographers to, switch to Panasonic or really consider them for the first time.
So it's not just about checking a box. It's about building a camera that people trust, a camera that they know will perform when they need it to.
Right. So, yeah.
And that trust, that confidence in your gear, it frees you up to be more creative. You
Yeah.
can take more risks.
It's about creating that synergy, between the photographer and the camera, where the camera just disappears and the creativity comes through.
I like that.
That's what we're all hoping for from the S1R2.
Okay, so we've covered speed, resolution, video, autofocus. Anything else that Leo mentions in his article that we should hit on?
Yeah, he also talks about build quality and how the camera feels in your hand, the ergonomics.
Right, right.
He says the S1R2 needs to be tough enough for pro use.
Yeah.
Weather-sealed body, controls that are easy to use. It's got to feel good in your hand.
So basically, it needs to be a workhorse, a camera that can handle anything you throw at it.
You got it. And the design needs to feel natural, intuitive.
So you're not fighting the camera.
Exactly. You can just focus on taking those great pictures.
Right, right. So it's more than just the tech inside, it's the whole experience.
The whole experience, yeah. Making the camera feel like an extension of your eye, your hand. And that's something Nikon and Canon, they've always been good at.
Right, right. They're known for those well-built, easy-to-use cameras.
Exactly. So Panasonic needs to pay attention to those details if they want to compete with the big boys.
So it's more than just the megapixels and the frame rates. It's about creating a camera that feels right.
Yes.
A camera that inspires you to create.
And that's what makes this whole conversation about the S1R2 so exciting.
It does.
It's not just about technology. It's about art.
Yeah.
And the tools that help us bring that art to life.
I love that. Okay, well, I think this is a good spot for us to take a break. We've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive into the S1R2 speculation. We've talked about Panasonic's current lineup, the challenges of going head-to-head with Sony's A7RV, and the key features that Leo thinks this S1R2 needs to be a success.
We've dug into Panasonic's, history with video, the power of the L-mount alliance, and how they're always innovating.
Yeah.
We also talked about the challenges, like autofocus and those big competitors like Nikon and Canon.
Right.
So we've laid the groundwork for a really interesting discussion. But we've really only scratched the surface.
We have. There's so much more to explore.
So much more. In the next part, we're going to take a closer look at Leo's analysis of Panasonic's S-series cameras.
Okay.
We'll break down each camera, the strengths, the weaknesses, and try to figure out where the S1R2 might fit in.
I like it. And we'll keep talking about those key features that Leo thinks are so important and how those translate into real-world performance.
Exactly, exactly.
We'll talk about the competition, how does it stack up against the Nikon Z8, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II.
Yeah. What does Panasonic need to do to stand out and get those pro photographers and filmmakers excited?
It's going to be a fun conversation.
It will be. So if you're interested in the S1R2, make sure you come back for the next part of our deep dive.
And in the meantime, let us know what you think in the comments. What do you think this camera needs to be successful? What features are you most excited about? We love hearing your thoughts.
We do.
And, those discussions are what keep these deep dives going.
Absolutely. So keep those comments coming, and we'll be back soon with more analysis as the camera world keeps changing. Until then, happy shooting.
Happy shooting.
We've said that just copying specs, trying to beat the Sony A7RV, that's probably not the best move for Panasonic.
Right.
But if they're not going for crazy resolution, then where should this S1R2 fit in? Leo's article, he really analyzes Panasonic's whole camera lineup. And it got me thinking, do they even need another camera?
That's a great question, you know?
It's easy to get caught up in, the hype of new releases. But you got to step back sometimes and look at the big picture. And, Leo breaks it all down, all the S-series cameras. And you do kind of wonder what gaps there are left for the S1R2 to fill.
Right. Let's remind ourselves about those cameras real quick. We talked about them in part 1, but what were the big takeaways from his analysis of the S5 series?
So he calls them the all-rounders.
Right.
Specifically, he likes the S5 side, the one with the better autofocus.
Yeah.
He sees them as cameras that can handle both stills and video pretty well.
Right.
Which is why they're popular with, content creators and hybrid shooters who, don't need those absolute top-of-the-line features.
Right, right. And didn't the S5 Psi, its autofocus was a hybrid system, right? Combining contrast and phase detection, making it more reliable, especially for video.
You're absolutely right, yeah. And that hybrid system is a perfect example of Panasonic addressing those past weaknesses. For a while, they were behind Sony and Canon in autofocus,
Yeah.
But they're working hard to catch up.
That's good to see. Okay, so the S5 series, they're covering that middle ground pretty well.
Seems like it.
What about that rumored S9? Where does that fit in?
Ooh, that one's a bit more mysterious, right?
Yeah.
Because it hasn't been officially announced yet. But from what we're hearing, it's going to be smaller, lighter, Maybe something that's easier to travel with,
Hmm.
aimed at more everyday photography,
Right, makes sense.
not necessarily professional use.
Not everyone needs a big, bulky camera,
Exactly.
even if they like having full-frame image quality.
Yep. Yep. And that brings us to the S1 series,
Mm-hmm.
Panasonic's flagship line. So you've got the S1R, the resolution beast.
Huh.
You've got the S1H, which is a favorite among filmmakers.
Yeah.
And then the S1 kind of sits there in the middle. Good all-around option.
So the S1R is for those pixel peepers who need all the detail. S1H is for video. And the S1, kind of that sweet spot in the middle.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But then that leaves us with, like, where does the S1R2 fit in?
Right. Let's get a bit crowded in there.
It is, yeah.
And that's where Leo's point about not going head-to-head with the Sony A7RV is really interesting.
Okay.
He thinks that instead of just trying to beat Sony at resolution, Panasonic should use their strengths to create something totally unique within the S1 series.
I like that. So instead of just another high-res camera, it's something with a totally different focus. But what could that be?
Well, think about what we said about Panasonic and video. What if the S1R2 was like the ultimate hybrid camera?
Okay.
Something that could actually compete with those dedicated cinema cameras for video features and quality, but still be amazing for stills.
So it could be a bridge between photography and filmmaking, something that pros in both those fields would be interested in.
That's the idea.
I like that.
And that's where all those features Leo talks about come in, like the 6K or 8K video, ProRes RAW,
Yeah.
great autofocus, solid build quality.
Right.
It's about being different, not just matching what everyone else is doing.
So this camera could handle serious video production with high frame rates for slow-mo, different codecs, so you've got options when you're editing, maybe even things like waveform monitors and focus picking built in, things like that.
Exactly. It's not just about the megapixels anymore.
Right.
It's about a camera that can do it all for those professional content creators, whether they're doing photos or videos.
I see what you mean, but even if they make this amazing hybrid camera, wouldn't they still be competing with their own S1H, which is their dedicated video camera? It seems a little weird, right?
That's a good point. And it makes us think about Panasonic's lineup again and like what gaps they might be trying to fill.
Yeah.
Maybe the S1R2 isn't about replacing an existing camera. Maybe it's about creating a whole new niche.
Okay, so explain that a little more. How would the S1R2 be different from the S1H, even if they're both great at video?
Okay, so the S1H, it's amazing, but it's mostly seen as a video camera, right? It's a bit bigger, and while it can take good photos, it's not perfect for every kind of photography.
So the S1H is like a specialized tool for filmmakers, but the S1R2 could be more like a multi-tool for people who need to do a bit of everything.
Exactly.
Okay.
And here's where some of those other features come in. Remember that fast burst shooting?
Yeah.
That would make the S1R2 way better for action, sports, wildlife compared to the S1H.
And if it has a bit lower resolution, like 45, 50 megapixels like we talked about, the files wouldn't be so huge and it'd be more versatile for everyday shooting.
You're getting it. It's about a camera that can do lots of things really well without being limited to just one specific category.
So it's a camera that could be your go-to for like almost anything.
Almost anything. Yep, stills, video, action, landscapes, whatever you need.
That's exciting.
It is.
But wouldn't they have to sacrifice something to make a camera that's so versatile? Can a camera really be the best at everything without having some weaknesses?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Master of one, or jack of all trades. And honestly, we won't know for sure until we see the S1R2. But what's interesting about Leo's argument is that he thinks Panasonic is the company to pull this off.
Because they're willing to try new things, to innovate, even if it means taking some risks.
Exactly. And this brings us to another one of their advantages. Remember how we were talking about the S1R2's autofocus?
Yeah, the hybrid system.
Right. Well, Leo thinks they could actually jump ahead of the competition with the S1R2 autofocus.
Okay, how?
By taking a different approach,
Mhm.
combining the best of, traditional autofocus tech with AI.
So not just fast autofocus, but smart autofocus.
You got it. Imagine a system that learns how you shoot, adjusts to different situations instantly, always keeping those images sharp, even when things are tough.
Wow.
That would be huge.
It would be like having a co-pilot for your camera, making sure you never miss a shot.
Exactly. It's not just about reacting to what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's about anticipating what's going to happen in NXT.
That's amazing. But even if they get all the technical stuff right, they still have to market it well. And Panasonic's going up against some big companies. How do they convince people to choose the S1R2?
Well, they need to tell a good story.
Okay.
make people feel something when they see this camera.
Yeah.
It can't just be about a list of specs.
Right.
It needs to inspire people, make them want to go out and create amazing things.
So it's about the experience, not just the product itself.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's something Panasonic has done well before.
Yeah.
Think about how they marketed the GH5. They emphasized how good it was for filmmaking, you know?
Right.
It gave filmmakers new tools to tell their stories.
And it worked. Right. A lot of filmmakers loved that camera because it allowed them to do things differently.
Exactly. And I think they could do the same with the S1R2. Market it as the camera for people who don't want limits, who want to push boundaries in both photography and filmmaking.
The camera for people who want it all. No compromises.
That's it. That's a powerful message. It could really resonate with people who are looking for that one camera to do everything they need.
So are you feeling optimistic about the S1R2?
Cautiously optimistic, yeah.
All right.
I think they have what it takes, but they've got tough competition.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting to see what happens. I can't wait to see this camera.
Me too. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more about it.
I'm sure.
So let's get into the next part of our deep dive. Look closer at Leo's breakdown of those S-series cameras, see what we can learn about the strengths and weaknesses, and maybe we can figure out where this S1R2 might fit in.
Yeah, there are already so many options.
Right. From the S5 series that can do a bit of everything to that powerful S1H for video.
So many choices.
Yeah.
Where does the S1R2 fit in?
That's the million-dollar question. Let's break it down and see what we can learn from what Leo's written. Maybe we can figure out what Panasonic is thinking with this new camera.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's start with the S5 series. What are your thoughts on those cameras based on what you've read and heard?
All right.
They seem to be doing really well. You know, lots of photographers and videographers are liking them, especially those who need a camera that can do both stills and video without costing a fortune.
Yeah, they're solid performers.
Not quite as fancy as the S1 series, but they seem to hit that sweet spot for a lot of people.
Yeah, and Leo agrees with that. He really likes the S55, especially how they improve the autofocus. That was something a lot of people complained about with older Panasonic cameras.
That's right. Their autofocus wasn't always the best. People would compare it to Sony and Canon, and Panasonic was kind of lagging behind.
Yeah, but they've come a long way.
They have, yeah.
And the S55 size shows that. The hybrid autofocus system, using both contrast and phase detection, it's much faster and more reliable now.
Which is a big deal for video.
Huge, yeah. You need to keep things in focus.
Exactly. And besides the autofocus, the S5 size seems to have a lot of other good features.
Oh, yeah.
It can shoot 4K video at 60 frames per second. It's got in-body image stabilization, and it's pretty compact and lightweight.
Right.
So it's a good all-around camera that won't weigh you down.
Exactly. It's no wonder it's so popular.
Okay, so the S5 series seems to have that mid-range covered pretty well.
It does.
What about that rumored S9? We talked about it earlier, but I'm still curious. What do you think about where it might fit in?
Well, all we have are rumors right now.
Yeah.
But they're saying it's going to be even smaller and lighter than the S5.
Okay.
Maybe something for, like, a more casual photographer, someone who just wants to take it everywhere.
So like a pocket full-frame camera?
Kind of, yeah.
That's interesting.
It makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
The full-frame market is getting more competitive.
Right.
And people want good image quality without sacrificing portability.
Yeah, you don't always want to carry a big, heavy camera.
Exactly. And I think the S9 could be a good option for that. Like a bridge between your smartphone and a full-frame camera.
Right.
The best of both worlds.
It would be interesting to see how they price it.
It would.
If it's affordable enough, it could be a really popular camera. Definitely. But for now, we're just speculating. We'll have to wait and see what Panasonic actually announces.
Exactly.
Speaking of official announcements, let's move on to the S1 series.
Okay.
These are the cameras that Panasonic is already selling, the ones that are their flagship models. Where do they fit into the market, and what are their strengths and weaknesses?
Okay, so the S1 series is their top-of-the-line stuff for professionals who need the best performance and image quality. And within the series, you've got 3 different cameras.
Right, each with its own focus. Let's start with the S1R. It seems like it gets the most attention, probably because of its resolution.
Yeah, 47.3 megapixels.
Wow.
One of the highest resolution full-frame sensors out there.
It's a beast.
It is. Perfect for those who need tons of detail. Landscapes, architecture, you know, portraits where you want to capture every little detail.
So it's the detail monster.
Exactly.
The camera you use when you want to print huge photos and have them still be crystal clear.
You got it. And it's not just resolution. The S1R has excellent dynamic range, which means it can capture a lot of detail, even in difficult lighting.
Okay.
It can handle those bright highlights and deep shadows, preserving all that
Yeah.
information.
It's built tough, right? Weather sealed?
Oh, yeah. Solid build quality, ready for professional use, inside or outside.
It's a workhorse.
It is. But even the S1R has some weaknesses, right?
Yeah. Nothing's
No
perfect.
camera is perfect.
Yeah.
One thing people point out is that the autofocus, while decent, it's not as fast or as good as some of the competition, like Sony's latest cameras.
Okay.
And the burst shooting speed is okay, but some photographers would want it to be faster, especially if they shoot sports or action.
So maybe not the best camera for those fast-moving subjects
Right, yeah.
or situations where you need to take a lot of photos quickly.
Exactly. It's better suited for slower types of photography, where you have time to set up your shot and let the autofocus do its thing.
So it's a bit more of a specialized camera. Amazing for some things, but not for everything.
Right. You pick the right tool for the job.
Makes sense. Let's talk about the S1H. This is the one that filmmakers love.
Oh, yeah.
What makes it so special?
Well, the S1H is all about video. It
Mhm.
was designed for professional filmmakers.
Okay.
It's packed with features that are perfect for video production.
Like what?
For starters, it can shoot 6K video internally,
Wow. Okay.
which is amazing for a camera that size and price.
Right.
It's also got a bunch of different professional codecs,
Yeah.
including 10-bit 4.2.2 internal recording,
Yeah.
which gives you way more flexibility when you're editing.
So it's not just about the quality of the video you're shooting, it's also about having the tools to make that footage look exactly how you want it
Yes, you got it.
in post-production.
It's a serious filmmaking tool. It can compete with those dedicated cinema cameras.
It's not just a stills camera with a video mode tacked on.
Nope, this is the real deal.
And it's got a bunch of other video-centric features, right?
Yeah.
Like waveform monitors, focus peaking.
Yep, all that good stuff.
Those are essential for professional filmmakers.
They are. And the S1H, it's built well, comfortable to hold for a long time.
So it's not just about the specs, it's about the whole experience of using it.
Exactly. And I think that's why filmmakers love this camera so much. It was designed for them,
Yeah.
It meets their needs.
Okay, so we've got the S1R, the Resolution King, the S1H, the Video Powerhouse, and then there's the S1. It seems like it's kind of the jack of all trades in the S1 series. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's kind of like the middle child.
Okay.
Does a bit of everything well,
Yeah.
Doesn't have that crazy resolution of the S1R or all the video features of the S1H, but it's a good all-around camera.
Right.
Solid performer.
So it's good for photographers and videographers who need something versatile, maybe don't need to specialize in one thing.
Exactly. You could use it for landscapes, portraits, events, even some video work.
And wasn't the S1 one of the first cameras to have that dual image stabilization system that Panasonic is known for now?
You're right. It was a bit of a pioneer there.
Yeah.
It combined in-body stabilization and lens-based stabilization for super smooth, steady footage, even when you're shooting handheld.
That's a big deal for filmmakers who want that cinematic look without having to use a gimbal or a tripod all the time.
Huge, yeah. And it's become a signature feature for Panasonic. It's one of the things that sets them apart.
So we've got the S1R for resolution, the S1H for video, and the S1 for those who need a bit of everything. But that brings us back to the big question. With all these cameras already in the lineup, where does the S1R2 fit in? It's starting to feel crowded.
It is, right.
And that's why Leo's article is so interesting. He's suggesting that the S1R2 might not be about filling a specific gap in the lineup, but about creating something entirely new.
Right. It's not about replacing an existing camera.
So it needs to be more than just another high-resolution camera or another video-focused camera. It needs to be something different.
It does.
But what could that be?
That's the big question. We talked about a camera that's amazing for both stills and video, something that bridges those two worlds.
Yeah, but is that enough?
That's a good question, and it's one we'll talk more about in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, good. Because I'm really interested in this idea of a hybrid camera that can truly do it all.
Me too.
It's an exciting concept,
Oh.
and I'm curious to see how Panasonic might approach this with the S1R2.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with.
Okay, before you move on, I just want to remind everyone to share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think this S1R2 needs to be a success? What features are you hoping for? What challenges do you think Panasonic has? Let us know.
We love hearing your ideas, and it helps us make these deep dives even better.
Exactly. We're all learning and exploring together. This camera technology is always changing. So keep those comments coming, and we'll be back soon with more analysis. Until then, Happy shooting.
Happy shooting.
So we've talked a lot about Panasonic's cameras, where they're strong and where this S1R2 might fit in. And they've definitely got some tough competition, not just from Sony, but those really versatile cameras like the Nikon Z8, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. But before we wrap this up, I want to go back to something Leo said in his article that really stuck with me.
Oh, interesting. What was it?
He said that for Panasonic to really shake things up with this S1R2, it can't just be about specs or following trends. It's got to be about pushing those boundaries, like what can a hybrid camera really do?
Yeah, he keeps coming back to that idea, and I agree with him. It's easy to get caught up in that megapixel race or who has the fastest burst rate.
Right, like it's this competition that most photographers don't even really care about.
Exactly. And Leo's saying Panasonic has the chance to change the whole game. Instead of trying to be the best at just one thing, they can make a camera that's great at everything. A camera that lets photographers work in new ways.
That's a big idea, but I like it. It's not just about making small improvements, it's about doing something totally new. And honestly, that's what Panasonic has done before.
Remember the GH5?
Oh, yeah.
When that came out, everyone was blown away by the video. It wasn't just a decent video camera, it changed everything. Other companies had to catch up.
It was like Panasonic was saying, hybrid cameras can be serious filmmaking tools, and everyone had to pay attention.
That's exactly it. And I think they've got that same opportunity with the S1R2. They can be the ones to say, this is the one camera you need. It can do it all. But they have to deliver on all those things Leo talked about.
The speed, the resolution, the video, the build quality, but also that's something special, right? The thing that makes it stand out. And you said before that you thought their autofocus could be that thing. What did you mean?
Well, we talked about how Panasonic has been improving their autofocus, especially with the S5i's hybrid system. But I think they can go even further with the S1R2. Imagine if they made a system that combines traditional autofocus with AI.
So it's not just about being faster, it's about being smarter.
Exactly. A system that can predict movement, learn how you shoot, and adapt to any situation.
It would be like having a co-pilot for your camera.
That's a great way to put it. It wouldn't just be reacting, it would be anticipating.
That's pretty incredible. But even if they get all the technical stuff right, how do they convince people to choose the S1R2? They're going up against some really big names in the camera world.
They have to tell a good story. Make photographers feel something when they see this camera. It can't just be about the specs. It has to be about inspiring creativity, helping photographers do their best work.
So it's about the whole experience, not just the product.
Exactly. And Panasonic's done that well before. Think about the GH5. They really focused on how good it was for filmmaking, how it could help people tell their stories.
And that worked, right?
It did. And they can do the same with the S1R2. Position it as the camera for people who don't want limits, who want to push boundaries in both photo and video.
The camera for people who want it all out.
That's it. It's a message that could really resonate with photographers and filmmakers who are looking for that one perfect camera.
So are you optimistic about the S1R2? Do you think Panasonic can do it?
I think they've got the potential to create something really special, a camera that meets the needs of pros, but also moves the whole industry forward.
And that's exciting for everyone, right?
It is. As photographers, as filmmakers, we're always looking for those tools that help us do better work and tell better stories.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, from Leo Liang's article to speculating about what this S1R2 might be. We talked about Panasonic's cameras, their history, and the challenges they face.
I talked about their strengths, how they innovate, how they're always pushing the boundaries, and of course, that idea of a hybrid camera that could change everything.
But at the end of the day, we'll have to wait and see what Panasonic actually releases. Until then, we can keep speculating.
That's part of the fun, right?
It is. But even if it's just speculation, these conversations are important. They help us think about the tools we use and what might be possible in the future.
They keep us excited about what's next.
Exactly. So, to all our listeners, let us know what you think. What do you want to see in the S1R2? What are you hoping for? Share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you.
And most importantly, get out there and shoot. Experiment, push your own boundaries, and keep telling those stories. Because at the end of the day, it's the stories that matter most.
Well said. Until next time, happy shooting.